Hey guys, it's Camus, and we're going to take a look at yet another tournament that Michael Basman just played in. This was recently, October 6, 2013, and this was the Four Nations Chess League Individual Rapidplay Championship. And much stronger field than the previous tournament, and well, I won't spoil the results of the game if you want to follow along. I'm not sure where this took place. I'm imagining it was somewhere around London where Basman lives, but perhaps I'll get more information for a subsequent round video. Okay, so let's get right to it. He was playing Chris Kirkland, rated 1744. This game was a lot closer than you would have imagined. I mean, Basman's he's an international master, and his current FIDE rating is, well, it's at a low right now of 2340, but still, that's nothing to sneeze at. So his opponent began 1e4. Basman, of course, chooses an outlandish reply, g5, which is the Borg defense. His opponent plays something slightly unusual, bishop c4. It's interesting, after d4, Rybka gives white a clear plus, whereas after bishop c4, thinks the position is equal. Basman plays knight to f6, d3. Now there's a threat against the g-pawn. So in previous similar positions, Basman has played h6. He's never been a big fan of the spike variation that Claude Bloodgood used to play. He would play g4 in similar positions in his games. This time he tries something new. He plays rook to g8, which certainly seems logical from some standpoint anyway. And now Rybka likes knight to c3, but his opponent preferred the slightly inferior e5. And Basman responded with the energetic d5. Now white has got a choice. Should he take on f6 or retreat the bishop? Well, if he had taken on f6, we would have seen something like the following. E takes f6, d takes c4, maybe f takes e7, bishop takes e7, d4, queen to d5, and there's a threat against the g-pawn there. If he plays knight to f3, then g4 will cause him to lose his g-pawn. So black is actually clearly better in this position. So his opponent wisely, after d5, decided to retreat the bishop. Then knight g4 occurred, hitting the e-pawn. He played knight f3, c5, h3, kicking the knight, who has to go to the inglorious square in h6. And now white has won a pawn here. So it's hard to say whether Basman wanted him to win this pawn. I mean, Basman is no slouch when it comes to tactics. It's quite possible that he wanted him to expose the king side like this. Without having talked to him, I don't know if this was a blunder or not. Knowing Basman, it probably wasn't. Knight to c6, bishop to a4, pinning the knight. Better than bishop to a4 was queen to h5, with something like knight to d4, knight to c3, rook to g6, castles. And Rybka thinks that white has a serious advantage in this position. But instead, after knight to c6, he played bishop to a4. Basman responded, queen to a5, check. c3 is a logical reply. b5, expanding on the queen side, kicking this bishop away. e6, and Rybka definitely prefers white here. Yes, it looks like black has got some issues on the king side. As a matter of fact, he can play knight takes f7 on the spot, and Rybka gives that as a practically winning advantage. The knight's threatening to come into f6, which is a very unfortunate place from black's perspective for that knight to be. So somehow his opponent either didn't see it or passed it up. But instead, after e6, he played bishop f4 instead. Basman continued to develop. Bishop to b7. And now, again, knight takes h7 was on offer. I guess this is a rapid play game. Anyway, he continued his development. He played knight to d2 instead. Basman understandably heads for the hills. He's probably worried about all this action on his king side, and he castles queen side here, but he misses a tactical shot. Unusual for him, actually. He could have played knight takes e5, and then after bishop takes e5, rook takes g5, and he's improved his position. He's got rid of the pesky knight, and he's won a pawn back, and black is actually better in this position. So, but after knight to d2, he didn't play that. He played castles queenside. White also castled, followed by bishop to e7 by black. And now Rybka really likes queen to h5 with a large advantage for white, but instead played knight g to f3. Crazy. Basman now starts to improve his position a little bit. Plays knight to f5. And now white tries something on the queen side, a4. But he plays b4, shutting down any kind of action on the a file. And now white makes first of a series of inaccuracies. What he should have played here was rook to c1. He would have probably been a bit better in that position. However, he played c4 instead, which only seems to help black. After d takes c4, now again, he makes another inaccuracy. He should have played bishop takes c4. This helps defend the pawn on d3, which is looking a bit tender. Instead, he's unable to resist the opportunity to attack the black queen, and he plays knight to takes c4 instead, just driving back the queen to a square where she probably wants to go anyway. Now this pawn on d3 looks quite sickly. Again, another inaccuracy from white, rook to e1. Basman plays knight c to d4 in true Nimzovician style. Restrain, blockade, destroy. So he's blockading the pawn here, and white resists the offer to exchange knights and plays knight c to d2. Now, in the course of just a few moves, white's position has really sunk. Rybka considers that rook to e4 is white's best move here. So that can't be good, offering the exchange to relieve the pressure. Basman's opponent did not see rook e4 or was afraid to play it. Played knight c to d2 instead. And now it's Basman's turn to be a little inaccurate. He plays queen to c6, which is perfectly fine, but he missed something of a knockout blow. He could have played rook takes g2 check, king takes g2, knight to h4 check, and this knight is pinned by the bishop on b7, so he can't recapture. This is probably what both players missed. King to f1, knight takes f3, knight takes f3, bishop takes f3, and now the queen does not have a lot of squares here. Queen to d2, and now black can win simply with just knight takes b3, but even stronger is queen to c6, rook to e3, knight takes b3 now, queen to e1, rook to d4, bishop to g3, knight takes a1, queen takes a1, c4, d takes c4, rook to d1, and we're winning the queen there. So this was a rapid play game, so it's easy to understand why Basman did not see the sequence, or perhaps he saw it and didn't have time to work out the entire sequence. Anyway, after knight c to d2, instead of that, he played queen to c6, which I said is a fine move. And now white makes a logical looking move, but it turns out to be the last mistake for him. He plays knight to e4, blocking this dangerous diagonal. I'm sure he's pretty nervous about this queen and bishop battery on the long diagonal. So knight to e4. What he had to play instead, just move back, was rook to e4. Knight takes f3 check. Knight takes f3. Rook takes d3. Queen takes d3. Queen takes e4. Queen takes e4. Bishop takes e4. Bishop to d1. King to b7. And black is definitely better in this position, but white is still on the board, and it's anybody's game. But instead, after queen to c6, he plays knight to e4. And now Basman plays perfect chess to finish him off. No mistakes from here on out. Knight takes f3 check. Queen takes f3. Knight to h4, attacking the queen and the g2 pawn. Queen to d1. Knight takes g2, stronger than rook takes g2. Bishop to g3, blocking. Knight takes e1. Queen takes e1. Rook to d3. It's hitting the bishop on b3 there, and with some dire threats against the king side. Bishop to c2. Queen takes e4. Queen takes e4. Bishop takes e4. Bishop takes d3. Bishop takes d3. Rook to c1. c4. King to h2. Bishop to c5. You can see here that we're a clear piece up for black. f4. Bishop to d4. b3. Desperation. But after c3, rook to d1, c2, he resigned, as it's impossible for him to stop the queening of the pawn without losing his rook. So another scrappy game, but once again, Basman shows his comfort in these chaotic positions. And I think that from watching a lot of his games, that he's just happy to reach an obscure, confusing position because he's confident that he's going to outplay his opponent at some point. So I don't think the opening went particularly well, but he was patient and found the right opportunities for the most part to improve his position and ultimately prevailed. Well, we'll see what happens in round 2 when he starts to play some stronger opponents. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this.